Let me ask you about this tweet. Claire Lehman made the original note on Twitter, or X, says, I'm starting to see quite a few center-left people distance themselves from so-called leftists due to all the genocidal pro-terrorist rhetoric. I mean, some loaded language there. Says a realignment is finally happening. And then you say you're getting a similar sense. Where do you see it? Why do you think it's happening?
I'm thinking if I can use a hyperlocal example, I'm in Victoria, and you may remember our museum, which is a very good museum, unlike the Royal Alberta Museum.
Whoa!
A few months ago, this was the big provincial project. They were going to take the museum, and the museum has some issues. I mean, it doesn't really get into the smallpox epidemic. It didn't mention Indian residential schools. So there had been consultations with First Nation groups saying, "Oh, we just change the museum, change the Indigenous, sort of make us part of the story, represent us the same way you represent the settler community, the Chinese Canadian community, treat us as normal people, please." So the province said, okay, we've heard you loud and clear. We're going to completely dismantle everything of this beloved museum because it's all dripping with colonialism and racism. We'll completely strip it to the bones and then rebuild it for $1 billion. And then everybody sort of flipped out at this. So the museum has sort of dialed back from that. They realized, it's got this cool diorama of Captain Cook's ship. It's got Captain Vancouver's ship. It's got this awesome diorama of an old town. So they've realized we went too far. Completely tearing apart this nice diorama of an old town that you can walk through, because we got it into our heads that's, the mere representation of a turn of the century BC town is somehow racist. And, but anyway, they've sort of dialed that down. They've reopened Old Town, and they're sort of, dialing back the crazy. I think I'm seeing this. We can all point to any number of examples. This happened in the 70s. We all forget about this. But after the 1960s, you had some extremes. Things got real extreme in the mid 70s, and then there was sort of a ratchet back. So I think there's any number of people in academia who have sat through meetings about having sort of race segregated classes as an anti-racism tool, who have had weird DEI sessions, who are sort of saying, I think we've gone a bit too far, and that's, particularly exacerbated over the last 2 months. You've seen some really extremist rhetoric coming out of some sort of high-level places. And so what I think is going to happen is you're never going to have this reckoning of people saying, okay, we took things way too far, we lost our minds. You're just going to quietly sort of forget that ever happened. So I would compare it historically to the 1970s. You got a Jonestown, you get the Weather Underground is trying to blow up Congress, and you're thinking, okay, maybe we went a bit too far with this. Let's just kind of calm down. But so I would call it quiet revolution in Quebec. Everybody just wakes up one morning, stops going to church. I think all the so-called wokery, I think a lot of it is just going to sort of disappear, and we're going to forget that it happened.
But do you think that it swings back like to the middle? Or do you think that things does the pendulum continue that momentum? Like it's one thing to talk about how society or people's.
I don't think it's going to switch too far. So I often ask people to consider what would it look like if it completely swung the other direction?
Yeah.
So you had a conservative version of anti-racism training where you're a bureaucrat and you have to sit through Thomas Sowell training, or you mandatory reading of Adam Smith. I don't know. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I mean, it may seem extreme just to return to zero, because people forget how far we've moved in the last 8 years. Just in 2015, something basic saying we understand trans people exist, but there are two genders, and obviously transitioning and becoming a lot has happened in the last 8 years. So it may seem extreme to return to the mean, but I don't see us getting as nutty on the right as we are on the left.
I don't know, man. It looks like Trump's getting elected again, and you could have suggested that Joe Biden and I'll be honest, I'd be voting for the Democrats if I was American right now, but I don't think Biden's a great candidate at all. Actually, I think he's a terrible candidate, to be honest with you. I think that there's two terrible choices, but the United States of America, if you look at polling in some of the big swing states right now, it looks like the U.S. is swinging back. And you can't just say to the Republican, it's not like a normal Republican. This is the most abnormal candidate in American history, probably.
Well, that's what happens when you get rid of your king. you just lose your mind with all that democracy. We didn't do
Yeah,
that.
I
So
guess.
we'll be much more moderate.
Yeah.